Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Sean Cairncross, Chief Executive Officer of the Millennium Challenge Corporation.
Thank you. Well, I am thrilled to be with everyone in New York today. Look, I'm from Minnesota, so as you may or may not know, but you all should know, the Minnesota Twins are on the verge of clinching their division, which means they will soon be playing and beating the New York Yankees in the American League Divisional Series, which I think starts Friday. So that got me thinking, how is it that a small market team like the Twins can compete with, and obviously we all agree, probably crush the Yankees, one of the largest, richest baseball teams in America? And the answer, I think, relates to how MCC is effectively fighting poverty. Data. Baseball is a human game, and human beings are emotional. Because of this, it's easy to let our emotions affect the way we make decisions. But like in baseball, if you want to win, you have to make decisions with your head instead of your heart. And that means looking at data. The same thing is true about working to reduce global poverty. Making feel-good decisions doesn't ensure the most effective results. Data does. The fight against global poverty is far more emotional than baseball, and the stakes are much, much higher. But when it's time to make decisions to fight poverty, we still need to rely on the data. To quote Michael Lewis, the author of Moneyball, people operate with beliefs and biases. To the extent that you can eliminate both and replace them with data, you gain a clear advantage. You might have read the book Moneyball. If you haven't, let me give you the quick Cliff Notes version. Billy Beane is the general manager of the Oakland A's, a major league team with limited resources and mired in mediocrity. Every time the A's come close to winning, they start losing to teams like the Yankees. The Yankees, who can spend millions on more expensive, better-known players. Well, Beane gets tired of this. He's tired of losing. And he realizes he can't continue to keep doing things the same way and expect a different result. He has to change the way the game is played. So he runs into a stats guy who tells him the way teams pick players is all wrong. What you have to do, says this guy, is follow the data. Beane does it, and he changes the game of baseball forever. Well, that sounds easy, but to do so, he had to overcome a scouting system based on decades of subjective, gut-feeling decision-making or emotion. In 2004, President Bush decided to change the game in the fight against global poverty, and he created the Millennium Challenge Corporation, or MCC, an agency that would implement U.S. foreign development aid differently by working to reduce global poverty through economic growth. Again, that's not reduce poverty and boost economic growth. It's reducing poverty through economic growth. And to execute that mission, MCC relies on data. We do this in both how we select who we work with and how we operate once that selection is made. The selection piece of what MCC does is based on analyzing objective third-party data on how a country is performing in three objective categories: good governance, economic reform, and investment in their people. In short, the best governed, poorest countries in the world. But what we're talking about today is how MCC operates once we've made that selection. So, what does it look like when data and analytics are brought to bear on global poverty reduction? Well, we know this much is true. First, government-to-government funding is not enough. We need private investment and job creation to grow market economies. Second, we have to take smart, calculated risks if we want big payoffs. And third, we must target institutional and policy reforms to unlock new opportunities for businesses and people to make sure that our investments last. Okay, so why focus on private sector investment? Well, you're going to hear this a lot, this speech, because the data tells us to. An estimated $5 to $7 trillion per year are needed to reach the UN's 2030 development goals. Yet foreign aid hovers at around $150 billion a year. There's simply no way to close that gap and hit those numbers without more private investment. So, how do we do this at MCC? We crowd in private dollars at every stage of project development to help eliminate some of the risks that private investors face when they look to do business in our partner countries. But how do we decide where to focus? When MCC selects a country to invest in, we conduct extensive objective analysis to determine what is holding back that nation's economy, and together with our partner countries, design a program to address these barriers. When MCC first partnered with Malawi more than 10 years ago, the country was facing significant health challenges and their needs were urgent. Many of the health issues Malawians faced were symptomatic of and exacerbated by poverty. Well, of course, we want to address such an urgent need. But in order for MCC to be effective in its role and in its design as an agency, our view has to be broader. We have to ask, what are the core constraints to economic growth in Malawi? Because only by eliminating these is there a sustainable fix. So, we kept our eye on the big picture, and our analysis showed that a lack of access to reliable and affordable electricity was a major constraint on economic growth. Moreover, the lack of access to power in the country had clear implications for public health. For example, hospitals without adequate power cannot properly refrigerate vaccines and other medicines. It was also clear that Malawi couldn't meet its energy needs alone. Major private investment was needed to connect its neighbors and create a new source of electricity generation. So, that's what we did. We built a large transmission line and power substation to connect Malawi to the Southern Africa power pool to import the power needed to get its economy moving. And this past April, as a direct result of MCC's work there, Malawi and Mozambique signed an agreement that will allow Malawi to import and trade power with its neighbor, bringing the country closer than ever to meeting its needs. This calculated, data-driven decision to focus on the energy sector means more jobs, electricity for hospitals, and kids doing their homework at night, and ultimately, a brighter future for Malawi. Look, to be very clear, the best decision I've made in my life to date, when I asked my wife, Emily, to marry me 18 years ago, I didn't run the numbers on that. I didn't look at the math before getting down on a knee and putting a ring on her finger, but it's still the best decision I've made in my life. Now, you might want to ask her. She might have run some numbers. She may be running numbers now. But what I'm saying is that sometimes we have to look beyond the immediate emotional stories to get better results. Poverty reduction is a large-scale, long-term endeavor, and it needs to be based on objective assessments to achieve maximum impact for the greatest number of people. Now, let's talk about risk. Why is it so important to take smart risk? Okay, well, let's say it's the bottom of the ninth, and I need one out. I need one out to win, and I'm the manager. My job is maximizing the chances of getting that out. But it's not totally in my control, right? If it were, I'd win every game. If the outcome were totally in our control, we'd solve poverty overnight. So what is in my control? Well, I can mitigate risk. By knowing a hitter's weakness, I know what pitches he can hit and what he can't. I know where he's likely to drop the ball, left, right, or center, and I'm going to maximize my chance of winning. So the only way I can dramatically reduce the risk is to use the stats. If the data says a batter can't hit a lefty, guess what? I'm going to throw in a lefty. If he's going to land a ball in right field, then I'll shift the defense. Development is an inherently risky business. We work in places where the need is the greatest, but we don't go in blind. We come armed with data, and we work with local experts to target our investments in ways that create an investment client that allows new partners to join us. If we can lay the groundwork for greater private investment by building roads, upgrading the energy sector, legal reforms to improve the playing field, providing training to give citizens the skills that will help them and businesses thrive, we are making a bet that we can attract new partners who will follow our investments with more resources and better results, creating lasting change above and beyond our initial aid funding. A few weeks ago, I was in El Salvador to launch the bid for the country's first large-scale public-private partnership. Our work with El Salvador identified what regulatory improvements needed to be made to make life easier for investors looking to do business in country. By conservative estimates, the private sector is expected to nearly double MCC's investment in El Salvador, and that's thanks to reforms that have changed the rules of the game for investors. Reforms MCC leveraged. Another endeavor that's inherently risky and that's very challenging is investing across borders. We all know that markets don't stop at national borders, so neither should MCC's investments. If we can help connect our partner countries to regional markets, we can create more economic opportunity, and that's why Congress, under the Trump administration, expanded MCC's authority to work on cross-border projects for regional integration and trade, like energy pipelines and roads. But working cross-border is risky. However, the potential payoff is huge, and we're going to tackle these investments with the same data and analysis that support our informed decision-making across the globe. Smart risk for long-term gain won't pay off unless there's a strong institutional framework to support our investments, and that's where the policy and institutional reform comes in. So, how do we make that happen? Well, when you put down big infrastructure and you do it purely with grant money, people sit up and take notice. They want in. So we use that carrot to leverage policy changes to make our investments sustainable and invite private dollars. For example, women's empowerment. Let me ask you, what's riskier than trying to change deeply entrenched cultural practices that have legal implications for half an economy's participants? The data shows we should be making an investment in women and making it a priority. A McKinsey study report found that $12 trillion could be added to global GDP by 2025 if gender gaps in employment and society are closed through the work of public, private, and social sectors. But taking on centuries of existing power structures that influence how people behave is hard. Fortunately, challenge is literally our middle name. And following the data, we identify sectors and laws stacking the game against girls and women, and we work to change them. To make this happen, we have to be disciplined. In Lesotho, we insisted that Parliament pass the Legal Capacity of Married Persons Act in order for MCC to continue working on our program. Before the law, married women needed their husband's or their father's permission to access loans and own property. After the law passed, MCC moved forward with our investment, which included funding to educate women about their new rights. Because of this, we saw many women demanding their rights. They wanted their names added to land titles with their husband, opening up their own bank accounts and businesses, and resolving their legal matters in local courts. Women must have the freedom to make their own economic decisions. This matters. You cannot grow an economy if half the population is left out, period. And we all know in our hearts that investing in women is a moral imperative, and data substantiates this. For MCC, this is the best dollar-for-dollar investments, one of the best dollar-for-dollar investments that we can make to reduce poverty through economic growth. Now, none of this comes together unless we can assure accountability. And it's not just about accountability for our partner countries, it's also about accountability to the American taxpayer. MCC collects and publishes data on all our investments, allowing us to track progress toward targets and course correct if needed. In the case of a recent project in Indonesia, the data showed part of the project wasn't working. Progress had been made in attracting the private sector to activities like cocoa cultivation and hydropower, but we found that the market ultimately was not responding as expected to mobilize greater private investment in renewable energy and sustainable land use practices. So MCC took back almost $70 million, over a third of our project's funding. We're not going to throw good money after bad. Others may say this, but MCC has a 15-year track record of following through. We will do what we say we are going to do. Making difficult decisions like that based on available evidence is what MCC is all about, and our model works because we stick to our principles. So, apart from the fact that we all agree the Twins will soon be world champions, I want to leave you with this. The United States of America has a big heart. We offer the world a model of freedom and self-reliance. We seek to build partners and friends and not create debt-burdened vassals. Others may, and while MCC is not competing in terms of scale, we are competing in terms of model, and that model is data. Progress in this mission has to be determined by metrics. Metrics cannot be met or assessed without data, and using that data will yield the most effective results. And this, ladies and gentlemen, will change the fight against global poverty forever. Thank you.